This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze because life itself is a maze. There's no direction from A to B because you know what? We're all going to get stuck by those obstacles, and those obstacles don't have to stop us. They should be challenges to move forward. That's why I invite certain guests on this podcast because when we learn from each other, we have that aha moment. Maybe if I did this, maybe if I did that, things would be different. Today, my guest I found through podmatch.com, and I'm so grateful because I don't think I would have met Tom just walking down the street, especially because I'm in the Cleveland area and he's down in Cincinnati, and that's about almost 5 hours difference between the two of us. So I don't think we had been walking down the street to meet each other. But what I liked about your bio, Tom, and it says the headline, our relationships are crumbling and getting worse. And I think we're seeing that. We all want to be right, but right isn't the answer to getting along. So give us some background.
Well, my background, Karen, is I'll try to do the flyover version. I was born as the oldest of 10 children. My mother had five of those children after the age of 45, which back in the 60s would have been a no-no because women weren't supposed to get pregnant that late. The babies would be damaged, et cetera, et cetera. And arguably speaking, the second five are more successful than the first five. So, but I'm the oldest of 10. Nine of us are still living. My brother Paul, who was 2 years younger than me, passed away of cancer in 1990 when he was 34, and that wound still sticks with me and with all of my siblings. He was a very special person, but I was educated in the Catholic tradition. I am no longer a practicing Catholic, but instead am a member of what has grown into a mega church, started very small and has grown over the last 27 years into one of the faster growing churches in the country. Very proud to say that I'm a member of that church. I had a long and varied business career. I was a leader in government, county government, state government for a while in the state of Illinois and Wisconsin. I then transitioned into business and have worked for a couple of very large companies like General Electric and Macy's. And I have worked for startups as well, and actually founded a startup on my own, and had a consulting firm for about 20 years that specialized in what we called small business turnarounds. We were fixers. The bank called us in, the lawyer called us in, the accountant called us in. Somebody was in trouble. Some entrepreneur had gotten sideways with some issues that might be marketing, might be finance, might be governmental regulations, but we were business fixers. And I retired officially in March of 2024, but I'm not a person who's going to sit on the couch watching cowboy shows.
Yeah.
So I am in the process of doing several different things, including mentoring a young man who's been kicked around pretty good by the system. He's 14 years old and needs some guidance. So I got in touch with an agency who put me in touch with him, and we're forging a relationship since May of this year. So that keeps me busy about 4 hours a week. And I wrote a book, which is probably one of the reasons why we're talking today. I wrote a book called The Business of Relationships, which is a series of essays about the qualities necessary for thriving personal relationships and how business leaders can be instructive in those qualities. It's kind of counterintuitive when you think of a business leader guiding us in personal relationships, but I found it to be inspirational, and some of my readers say the same. So I'm happy to talk about that and those qualities, but but also interested in your premise at the beginning that relationships are floundering everywhere. We are more siloed, more angry, more depressed, more anxious than probably at any time in our future. And it's a real threat not only to our individual mental well-being, but I believe it's an existential threat to the country itself that we live in, because we don't seem to be able to relate to one another if we are not of the same political party or political persuasion. And I don't think that has existed in our country in its history, or at least for quite some time. It's really going to do some damage to us, and already is.
Well, as I read your bio and have been thinking about this, especially after what transpired in the past week, and for those of you listening, if you're listening way in the future, I'm talking about, the first week of September, um, just a lot of anger and violence has erupted globally, not just here in the United States. And I started thinking, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I know there were disputes and political parties, didn't always agree, and businesses didn't always agree with their employees and employees with the CEOs. But I don't remember this type of anger. And I never saw real anger in my family. Now, my parents, we used to call them the Bickersons because they would bicker back and forth, but they would hug and love, and they would accept the fact that maybe they thought differently, and they would still come together. It's only really within the last maybe 10, 15 years that I have felt threatened by the anger around me. And I've never been one to not share my views, but when I share them, say, these are my views based on my traditions, my culture, my upbringing. Now, we don't have to agree, but I'd certainly like to hear what you have to say because I could learn something from it. But lately, I'm
Well,
afraid to do that.
I guess partly due to my business background, Karen, I'm a stats guy. I'm a numbers guy, if you will. And some of the numbers that really scare me are the fact that 60% of us right now in America, 60% of our adult population says that loneliness is my constant companion. You think about that for a minute. Loneliness is my constant companion. We are isolating ourselves. We are crawling into the abyss of social media and electronic communication as a substitute for human to human contact. We are, shrinking, if you will, from many of the larger social issues because of that isolation. We don't have a population right now that is rallying around that. 68% of us, even more than the loneliness factor, 68% of us say that we fundamentally don't trust each other. We don't trust another person. And that's different. You and your husband are obviously, living in a household. You probably trust each other for most things. But when you look outside of that cocoon, you say to yourself, am I one of those 68%? Do I really trust other people? Do I think that they might have my best interests at heart when they act? So I think that's difficult. You look across business and you say that, in many cases the business people are saying that lost productivity worldwide, lost productivity due to failing relationships is a $7.8 trillion problem with a T. Okay, this is reflected in higher absenteeism rates. This is reflected in people who tend to quit abruptly without notice. terminology like workplace ghosting and
Yeah.
bare minimum Mondays and quiet quitting and all of those terms that we've become familiar with, and we smile at them and we say, well, that's interesting. Whoever came up with that phrase was really creative, but the underlying problem is extremely damaging to business. And I think you talk loss of productivity, you talked dollars and cents, you talk about the various symptoms of that. The one that really grabbed me, and I just when I talk about it still, it either chokes me up or frustrates me. It's not something that I gotten over in several months of quoting this, but what is said is that American children, when you think about this for a minute, American children are 3 times more likely to grow up in a single parent household than the worldwide average. So, this isn't a third more, or it isn't, 1.5 times, it's 3 times more likely. And we have made separation, divorce, we have made the inability to resolve conflicts. We've elevated that almost to an art form. And people are bowing out of relationships rather than work through them and understand that there are going to be difficulties, there are going to be peaks and valleys. You know this, and I know this. But conflict resolution is one of the major skills that employers are saying younger employees don't have. They don't stick around through the conflict. They quit, or they retreat, or they ghost somebody, or a lot of somebodies. And I just think that there is real danger when you talk about those kind of statistics, that the children are now the victims, 3x the worldwide average in America. And this is the most powerful country, the most democratic country, the richest country in history, et cetera, world leader in technology, world leader in inventions, et cetera. And we just can't seem to get our relationships right. And
Well, it's interesting. I have 2 sons. They're 15 years apart. They're both adults at this point. And I saw a shift when I had my youngest, as I was bringing him up, that other families kept telling their kids, do what you want to do. They weren't directing them. Now, we were a little bit more direct with our son. We understood that he had some disability issues, so we worked around that. We never told him he wasn't capable of doing something, but we made sure that we helped him find the tools to do things in the most appropriate way. And when he was younger, especially in high school, he would come home and say, you guys aren't fair. My other friends get to do this and they do that. And I said, well, you know what? I grew up saying that to my parents too. And my parents still had rules. And it's only since he's become a mature adult and in the working world that he's come back to us and said, thank you. Thank you for putting some rules in place. But thank you for explaining to me why you had those rules in place. Because we just didn't say, oh, you have to be home at 10 o'clock tonight because we say so. We gave him reasons why he had to be home by 10 o'clock. There was a curfew in the city. At his age, he had to be home by 10 o'clock. If not, we might have to go to the police station and pick him up and pay a fine. And so when he understood that, he was willing, maybe not happily willing, but he was willing to be home by 10 o'clock. His friends weren't told that. And his friends' parents maybe just didn't care. Maybe they thought, big deal. And what's the chance of you being picked up? That's where I think we're failing as parents and employers, we're not communicating our reasons.
Mhm.
And if we communicate them, maybe the younger generation who's ditching a job because they just don't like it today, maybe they'd understand, hey, if I stick around, maybe I can be part of a change. Maybe I can be part of something bigger. But if I walk away, then what?
Mhm.
And business is losing money every time we walk away from a job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, depending on the position you might be recruiting for and the seniority of that position, any good recruiter would tell you that it could cost you 3 times annual salary to find and train and onboard the new employee and get them up to speed. So every time one of these disgruntled people quit abruptly, it could cost that business very dearly, and especially in the smaller businesses where executive level talent is oftentimes developed over many years and many different promotions. If you get someone who abruptly quits there, that business is really going to see a brain drain, out the door. So it was interesting when you were speaking earlier. I thought of the ways we instruct our children, and I think what we've abdicated is the ability to communicate what type of situations and questions are you going to be encountering as you grow. You become a senior in high school, you're in college, you've got your first job, you might be in a new city, et cetera, et cetera. All of the life circumstances that happen pretty quickly from age 16 on, into the mid 20s. There's a lot of foundation laid there. And I was speaking with someone the other day, and I said, if you paralleled this with school, you would say, in general, when we are in school, we are given probably 3 different types of tests. There's a test that would have a lot of true false questions. There's a test that would have a lot of essay questions. And there's a test that we all disliked, or at least I did, the multiple choice, especially when they threw in none of the above or all of the
Yeah.
above. But it occurred to me as I was speaking to this person that very little of what happens after college is a true false test or an essay test. The boss doesn't come to you and say, give me 250 words about why I just assigned the quarterly financial report to you. Nor are they saying, true or false, you will have the quarterly financial report on my desk tomorrow at 9 a.m. Those kind of tests don't exist. But multiple choice is out there in so many different ways. We're encountered decisions about where we live, who we live with, where we work, what we do. Is it fulfilling? How do I navigate the volunteer landscape when I'm outside of work? What are my habits? What are my goals and objectives? And those are all multiple choice questions. And I don't think we as I don't know that the current generation of parents who are parenting young children, preteens, early teens, etc. I don't think they're really doing justice to their children by not talking about multiple choice. Life is not true, false, and it's not essay. It's multiple choice. And I think that we need to get back to that. And you spoke about it very well, that you gave your son a grounding in terms of what he can do, with his disabilities. What can you do? Where can you go? That type of thing. I think we're lacking in that.
It's interesting. My youngest son has been working in the sporting industry now for almost 12 years. And he went from the WNBA back into baseball this past spring. He's not a player. He just part of management. And he got to his new location, all excited because he was told, this is what we expect of you in this job. And he went in and he said, great, but I need to sit down and talk to you about, do you have any rules in place, any procedures in place? Because I'm not going to step all over you. We're going to do this together. And the comment was, oh, just do what you know how to do. That's why you were hired. And he called me one day and he goes, Mom, this makes no sense because I'm the new guy. And they've been doing this in this particular business for 30 years. I'm one of the youngest ones walking in. He said, this isn't what you taught me. Mm-hmm. I said, then I would go back and do it again, see what they say. And again, the same thing was just do what you need to do. So he finally gave in, started doing what he perceived, and he created it, and he kept sending them every day a report. This is what I did. This is why I did it. This is what I accomplished. This is where we can go next. Didn't see anything for 30 days. Thought he was doing a great job. 30 days later, his so-called manager walks in, doesn't explain anything other than says, you're doing a terrible job. And he looked at her and he said, explain to me why. What do you want me to do differently? And the answer was, if you don't know, then this isn't the job for you. He was smart enough to put out some feelers. He knew this was not going to be long-term. But I've seen so many other people go through that exact same thing in business, where you get hired based on the way you interviewed in your resume. God, that's glowing. Come in and do a job.
Right.
But not everybody's relationships are going to be the same. And so if you don't communicate what you expect, it's going to fail. And I see that happening in businesses all the time. And when it happens in business, it's happening personally too, because you feel defeated.
I had a colleague of mine many years ago. He was terminated by his then new employer, and he was a senior executive. So it was a 5-month runway that he had, basically speaking. And the way it was explained to him by the HR director, because it resonated with me. I was remembering back to that as you were describing your son's experience. The HR director actually said this to him. She said, what you didn't understand when you came here was, yes, we wanted you to redecorate the room, but you aren't allowed to move any furniture. He was hired to be the change agent, the one that would drag the company into the 21st century, if you will. And yes, you're right. We did hire you because you're a change agent, but you're not able to move any furniture.
And we're seeing that socially, okay, that, you can come to this town meeting and tell us how you feel. But if we don't like how you feel, we're going to shut you down. Mm-hmm. You get together with friends and somebody brings up a subject that you just feel is not appropriate for the evening. And you make a comment, let's not talk about this now. Let's talk about something else. And all of a sudden, you've ruined the conversation because they want to communicate one way, you want to communicate another. I don't understand why, and maybe I'm being a Pollyanna, Tom, and it's very good possibility, but I don't understand why we can't collaborate. I don't have to be right, but I have to understand if I'm going to be doing something with you. or I have the choice of moving on. But talk to me about it and understand that you don't have to always be right either.
Right. That's correct. That's correct. I think what we have lost is really a couple things. One is I think we've lost the ability to communicate with one another because we have so much power in the palm of our hand. I mean, there are some people that say AI is the new God. I don't need any kind of relationship with you if I want to live a life that is self-sufficient. I can do that. I can order anything I want on Amazon. I can order any food I want on DoorDash or Grubhub or a variety of different things. I can look anything up and have some kind of familiarity with the subject in minutes. With ChatGPT and other AI tools. Um, People are writing books with AI. They're writing magazine articles. They're writing emails, automatic responses. I think we're becoming more and more self-sufficient, and in the process, becoming more isolated. And so the need to be right is there because, unlike at any other time in our history, we don't we don't need to argue with someone. We can say, I'm done. I'm out. This conversation is over. And there isn't, other than the psychological penalty, there is no real penalty to isolating, and there is no penalty to not being part of a tribe, whatever that tribe may look like. So it's become very, very easy to be self-sufficient, and I think that ease is very, very damaging.
Well, it's interesting. This past weekend, I I write a blog at least once a day. I'm not going to write a book because I know what goes into writing a book, and you don't get rich off of writing a book. You probably don't even break even. Um, so my words are out there on the internet, and if anybody wants to read them, they can. But what I wrote the other day, I woke up Saturday morning feeling really depressed. Not depressed I was going to hurt myself or anything like that, but just feeling like, how can I dig myself out of this dark cloud I'm walking in? And one of the ways I can do that is by writing, getting my feelings out and thoughts. And I have to say, this is the first time in probably 10 years since I've been blogging that I got some humanity responses. People saying, giving me what they would do. And I could say, that's great. Maybe that's not what I'm going to do, but hey, thank you for that. I'm going to put that in my toolbox. That may come in handy someday. But right now, I know what I needed to do was to get those feelings out and to actually say, I'm going to come out of this. Right now, I can't tell you how. I've had over 1,000 responses since Saturday. And it's warmed my heart that there are people out there who want to communicate. And they're not telling me I have to go pray to God necessarily, but they're saying what helped me was going to church. What helped me was going and standing barefoot out on the grass. What helped me was watching a funny movie. Everybody communicated something different, but they never said, Karen, this is what you have to do. And all of a sudden, I could feel that cloud lifting. There are some wonderful people out in this world.
Absolutely.
We don't have to crumble. We can build ourselves back up.
Yes, yes. Well, and conversations like this are helpful. You have listeners who will be taking wisdom from you, hopefully a little bit from me now and again. But our conversation here is geared to, I think, helping people recognize where they are in or out of a relationship, where they are in and out of their life, and then possibly imparting some wisdom to them that will help them navigate whatever it is they're challenged with in the future. The recovery community, and I I always am shy about using a quote like this, but I will, and trust your audience to
Okay.
take it for what it's worth. Um, the recovery community has a saying, if you will, and they say, if you have one foot in the past and one foot in the future, you are pissing on the present. Okay. And I always chuckled at that, but it's really true that so much of what we are fearful of, so much of what we resent, so much of what we experience remorse over, or anger, or anxiety, is either something we can't impact at all because it's past, it's finished, the bow has been put on the present, and it's over with, or we are in anxious hope or denial or fear of the future. And I find that when I stay grounded in the present, even if it has to be moment to moment on some days where you're white knuckling your way through I don't know, a tough interview, or back to back meetings, and everything else that goes on in life. A teenager that's crossing boundaries that he or she shouldn't. Whatever those challenges are, I find that if you can stay in the present, that's a huge tool for all of us. And I've read a couple of recent books on the topics of overthinking and rumination, and how our thoughts are deceiving us, if you will. The ego is speaking, and I find that to be especially important because, as you put it, you can get all twisted up about what you did or what you think will happen, and you just miss out so much on by not staying in the present.
Well, I probably spent the first 60 years of my life being an overthinker, to the point that I didn't realize how unhappy I was, because I kept doing for others and thinking, well, if I do a little bit more, I'm going to be happy. If I do a little bit more, I'm going to be even happier. And then one day I woke up and I said, I'm not happy. Like, what's going on? And I really thought at that moment when I said that I wanted to leave my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting down with my husband, telling him at that moment, I'm not happy. And he goes, okay, what can I do? And I said, no, you can't do anything. I have to do it. He said, okay, what do you have to do? And my first reaction was, I just have to pack my bags and leave. And he goes, okay, where are you going to go? And of course, I had no idea. But he said something that was almost like my father talking to me. And he said, you're going to take yourself with you. Mm. And I said, whoa. Yeah, you're right. I don't have to leave you. Mm. I don't have to leave our son. I don't have to leave my job. Wow. I have to leave all this baggage somewhere else. I have to get rid of it. And that's when I started training on coaching and trying to understand, why am I carrying it around? And one of the things I realized was it was my own fault. And that was a relief, because I'd been blaming it on everybody else. It's because I took care of you and you didn't say thank you. Or I did this and I didn't get something for it. When I realized it's my responsibility, what a difference. And it's easier now for me to communicate with people and let you know what I need. And I don't think I'm anything special in that regard. We all have that ability. but how do we get rid of the fear of communicating?
That's that is probably the $1 million question for the day, right? How do we get rid of the fear of communicating? Um, I think frequently when I speak about the topic of relationships, which is obviously what I wrote about in the book, but when I speak about that, I often speak about vulnerability and I speak about the ability to look in the mirror. And I think many of us have uh, put aside or lost the capability to be accountable to themselves. It sounds like a trite phrase, but be the person you want to be. That kind of mantra, and it's a little silly and it's a little funny, if you will, but I think being accountable to yourself and creating the person you want to be is critical. And it's especially critical when you look at, are you capable of looking in the mirror and saying, what's my role in this? You know, how much of the dissatisfaction, how much of the anxiety, how much of the depression, how much of the um, sense of failure or not measuring up, how much of that is me? And if I can fix me, it's highly likely that the other person or persons in the relationship won't be as flawed as I think they are, because as I think I said earlier, every problem is a relationship problem. We're human beings and we're trying to relate to one another, doing a poor job of it, lately anyway, in the last
Right.
15 or 20 years. But that is the why for our existence, I think, is to be in relationship, to be in a tribe, to be in a group, in a community. And when we lose that, it's damaging not only to us, but it's damaging to everyone around us because the tribe is fractured at that point.
So, how can my listeners follow you, get more information about what you do, and especially in the support?
Well, if they wanted to purchase my book, The Business of Relationships, it's out there on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and a variety of other Google Play and Apple iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. So they can get it in print or electronic form at the uh, venue, if you will, of their choosing. uh, and as far as following me, my website is under development, but it's thetomhagerty.com. And I do corporate presentations, civic presentations, seminars, all about relationships. And I think the foundation, Karen, for me is, and we didn't talk a whole lot about this, but I think the business leaders that I cite, some are very well known. It's Steve Jobs, it's Warren Buffett, it's Jack Welch, it's Bill Gates, Sheryl Sandberg, Carly Fiorina. But then there are many, many that are lesser known. And without a business background, you wouldn't encounter this person and say, I know exactly who Anita Roddick is. I know exactly, who Tom Peters is, or whatever. But I think the quotes that I've selected for the essays in the book, and again, this is really about, if you want a thriving personal relationship, then you have to develop and enhance qualities like perspective and honesty and trust and resilience and humility and change and risk and others. There's pretty much 12 foundational qualities that not every source agrees on, but they mention them frequently enough that you say, if I had to write about 12 qualities to enhance or develop, I'll pick those 12. Um, you know, and I think, one of my favorite easy examples is Jack Welch was the chairman and CEO of General Electric back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000, and he was a tough guy. Jack Welch was very tough. I worked for GE during his tenure. I never got to meet him, but I met his immediate right hand guy, and Jack had this quote that was cited in one of his books. He said, "Change before you have to." And I thought about that in the context of a relationship because the way he said it had nothing to do with a relationship. He was giving a speech, pretty newly elected CEO, giving a speech to his business leaders, the ones who headed up GE Medical and GE Aerospace and GE Finance and all of the big divisions, corporate. And his message was simply this. He said, if you are not number one or number two in your marketplace, I will fix you, close you, or sell you. So change before you have to. And it was the marching orders. I mean, everybody was crystal clear,
Yeah.
right? When I think about change before you have to, those 5 words, how could that apply to a relationship? Change before you have to, the passive aggressive nature that's getting you nowhere in your family. Change before you have to, the financial irresponsibility. Change before you have to, the budding addiction. Change before you could go on and on and on. And I had a lot of fun writing that particular essay. I had fun writing all 52
Yeah.
of those essays, but I mean, that one was special to me because of a little bit of my own history, having spent some time at GE under Jack Welch, but also the power of the words when you say in a relationship, look in the mirror, change before you have to. Whatever the have to is, what it is, you're dealing with it, and you better change, or life is not going to be
I love it.
hearts and flowers.
Well, thank you for joining me this morning. I totally have enjoyed this engaging conversation. All of your information will be in the show notes. So if you that are listening say, hey, where can I find the book? How can I find Tom? Just go back into the show notes. It will be there. And hopefully we can follow up in the near future, Tom, and have another conversation.
Absolutely, I'd love it. This was really great, Karen. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Had a
What
great
a way to
day.
start the
Bye-bye now.
week. Bye now.